Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're tackling a topic that's, well, it's pretty hot right now.
Yeah, it's definitely generating a lot of buzz.
All about how, all these changing values in society, they're kind of shaking up our ideas about masculinity.
Hmm.
And specifically, we're focusing on how this plays out in the Black community.
It's a conversation that's been going on for a while, but it feels like it's reaching a tipping point.
Yeah, it's definitely front and center these days.
Hmm.
So, to guide our deep dive today, we're going to be looking at this essay called,
The Erosion of Society's Foundation.
right,
Okay.
that's the one. And let me tell you, this essay, it does not pull any punches.
Oh, no, it goes straight to the heart of the matter.
It tackles some really, really big issues.
Yeah.
Arranged marriages, woke culture, even,
The whole bad boy phenomenon and why it's so enduring.
exactly. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. And our goal isn't to tell you what to think.
Right, definitely not.
We're here to lay it all out, explore these different viewpoints, and, hopefully give you a clearer understanding of what's going on.
A more balanced perspective.
That's it. Now, even if you don't identify as Black or male, this stuff matters.
It really does.
Because we're really talking about the very foundation of relationships.
Has powered in it.
How we prepare the next generation.
It's about how we function as a society.
Exactly. So, with that in mind, let's dive in. And I think a good place to start is with a little bit of historical context.
Yeah, I agree.
Because this essay, it really emphasizes the unique position of Black men throughout history.
Right. They face so many challenges. I mean, we're talking about systemic oppression, discrimination.
Yeah, it's been a long and difficult road.
Absolutely. And yet, in the face of all that, they've shown incredible resilience, leadership.
That's something that really struck me when I was reading this essay. It's like, imagine trying to build a house, but the ground beneath you is constantly shifting.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
And you're expected to not only build this house, but also lead your family and community.
It's a heavy burden to carry. And speaking of historical context, the essay brought up something that we, find really fascinating today, and that's arranged marriages.
Yeah. Arranged marriages.
Yeah.
It's something that gets a lot of attention and debate.
It does. But we have to remember that arranged marriages, especially in certain cultures, they weren't just about romantic love, the way we might define it today.
It was more about family.
Exactly. It was about creating strong family units, building community bonds. It wasn't a perfect system by any means.
Of course not. No system is perfect.
But it did serve a very specific purpose for its time.
Yeah, it's all about context, isn't it? Now, fast forward to today, and, we see all these societal shifts playing out in a really vivid way, especially when it comes to education.
Oh, absolutely. Education is a kind of a microcosm of the larger societal changes.
The essay points out this pretty alarming statistic about Black boys being disproportionately disciplined in schools.
Right. And it's particularly bad under these zero tolerance policies.
Zero tolerance, yeah.
And this raises a really important question, Is this all just about behavior?
Or is there something else going on here?
I think there's definitely more to it than meets the eye. Are we maybe witnessing a clash between, those more traditional expressions of masculinity and the ways schools are changing?
It's almost like these policies, they're intended to create order, but they might actually be pushing Black boys further away from really engaging in their education.
That's the concern. Some argue that dismantling what some call toxic masculinity without taking into account those cultural nuances, well, it could actually backfire.
So it's not about condoning bad behavior.
Not at all.
It's about recognizing that what might be seen as aggressive in one context.
Could be assertive in another. There's a fine line there.
It's a fine line, yeah. Okay, so we've got schools, and then, we move from the classroom to the workplace.
And that's where things get, well, even more complex.
The essay really digs into diversity mandates, hiring quotas, which, on the surface, they're meant to level the playing field.
Yeah, to make things more equitable.
But the essay suggests that these policies, while incredibly important, can sometimes lead to this perception of reverse discrimination against Black men.
It's a tricky situation, isn't it?
It is.
Because it creates this double bind.
Hold on, can you unpack that a little bit? What do you mean by double bind?
Sure. So on the one hand, you have this pressure to prove yourself within a system that, you might see as being stacked against you.
Right, because there's still systemic racism and all that.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, there's the possibility of being, stigmatized for benefiting from policies that are designed to help.
So it's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
That's it, yeah. It's a tough spot to be in.
And then on top of all that, you layer on the persistent stereotype of the angry black man.
Right, which can penalize any expression of frustration or even assertiveness.
It's like you're being judged on a completely different scale.
And that's a heavy weight to carry.
And you see this play out in the media as well, right?
All the time.
All the time. This essay really takes the media to task for overrepresenting negative stereotypes,
Focusing on crime, aggression.
even if it's unintentional.
Right, even if it's not deliberate, it still shapes public perception.
It creates these expectations, these boxes that black men are expected to fit into.
And it can be incredibly damaging, both to how they're seen by others and how they see themselves.
It's like they're being told who they are instead of being allowed to define themselves. So we've talked about schools, we've talked about workplaces, media.
And I think it's time we turned our attention to families.
Families, yes. This essay expresses concern about the erosion of traditional masculine roles and how that might affect family stability.
Particularly within the Black community. Right.
Right.
Now, it's important to clarify that the essay isn't saying that all families have to stick to one model. I mean, supporting diverse family structures is essential.
Absolutely. Times have changed.
They have. But understanding those historical roles, their significance, I think it's crucial if we want to have a nuanced conversation.
It's not about going back to the past. It's about understanding where we came from.
Exactly. And recognizing that those roles, they did provide a certain kind of stability, a sense of cohesion.
So the concern is that if you undermine those roles without offering anything in their place, without providing those alternative support systems.
You could end up weakening families instead of strengthening them.
And if families struggle, communities struggle. It's all interconnected, isn't it? And that brings us to a section in this essay that it kind of blew my mind. It has this whole appendix dedicated to women's attraction to bad boys and how that impacts society.
It's funny because it's such a common trope, right? The bad boy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's be real. Who hasn't been attracted to a little bit of danger at some point, right?
I think there's a certain allure to the unconventional, the unpredictable.
Definitely. So what's the essay's take on all this? Spill the tea.
Well, it goes beyond just personal preference. It dives into the psychology, even the evolutionary reasons behind this attraction. Think about it. Traits like confidence, risk-taking.
This could have been pretty advantageous back in the day.
Oh, absolutely. Think about a hunter-gatherer society.
Right. Like, the bad boy might have been the one bringing home the biggest kill.
Protecting the tribe from danger.
Those were valuable skills.
Essential for survival. But those same traits that might have been beneficial in the past, they can lead to some problems in modern relationships.
Oh, yeah. Like, excitement is great, but stability is pretty important, too.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that the essay suggests that by glorifying this bad boy behavior in our media and pop culture, we might be, accidentally normalizing risky actions.
Oh, wow.
And that could be contributing to, the breakdown of those traditional family roles that we were just talking about.
I see. So it's like those traits that might be attractive at first, they could actually lead to situations that kind of undermine what people are looking for in a long-term, stable relationship.
Exactly. It's a bit of a paradox.
It is. It really is.
And this leads to another key observation from the essay. While individual choices are important, of course, we can't ignore the ripple effects, how those choices impact the broader social fabric.
Right. It's not just about you. It's about the community, society as a whole.
Precisely. And when we're talking about, shifting values, we have to be aware of the trade-offs.
What are we gaining? What are we losing?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
It's like we're in this massive social experiment, and we're all figuring it out as we go.
In real time.
Yeah.
And that's why these conversations, these deep dives, they're so crucial.
They really are.
We need to look at things from all angles, even the ones that might make us a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And this essay, with some of its, more provocative arguments.
Oh, yeah, it definitely pushes some buttons.
It definitely pushes us to do that, to think critically.
It does. And it also raises some thought-provoking points. For example, the essay argues that some of these traditional masculine traits, while they can be problematic,
Sure, of course.
they've also been a source of strength and resilience, particularly in the Black community.
That's right. You can't just dismiss the whole thing as toxic.
Right. There are good and bad aspects to everything. So it's more about recognizing that and finding a way to kind of separate the two.
To find that balance.
Yeah. But how do we actually do that? That's the big question, right?
It is a big question. How do we redefine masculinity in a way that's, both empowering and responsible? How do we support Black men in navigating these shifting expectations, these changing roles, without erasing their history, their culture?
It's a lot to consider.
Mm.
And it's clear from this essay, and honestly from just, being out in the world,
Right, paying attention to the conversations happening around us.
yeah, these issues aren't going away. We can't ignore them.
Mm.
We have to have these conversations even when they're, a little messy.
A little uncomfortable.
Yeah, maybe even a little heated.
That's part of the process.
It is. One thing that really struck me in the essay, though, was the emphasis on personal responsibility.
Oh, interesting.
Like, even while it's critiquing these larger societal trends,
Mhm.
it really stresses the importance of individual accountability.
It's not about pointing fingers or placing blame.
It's about recognizing that each of us, we have a role to play in shaping the kind of society we want to live in.
Exactly. We have to be accountable for our own choices, our own actions. And that begins with, with honestly acknowledging the
The
challenges.
challenges we face, yeah, both individually and as a society.
We have to acknowledge the systemic issues, the cultural biases, the historical baggage, all of it.
But we also have to empower individuals to make choices that benefit not just themselves.
But their families, their communities,
Right.
it's a delicate balance.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's a balance we have to find if we want to create a society that's truly just and equitable for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. So let's circle back to where we started. Black masculinity in this, constantly changing world.
Yeah.
What are some key takeaways for our listener? What do we want them to walk away with?
What have we learned?
Well, the biggest takeaway for me is that there are no easy answers.
Yeah, this isn't a black and white issue.
Not at all.
There's so many shades of gray.
It's complex, it's nuanced, and it requires us to, to really think critically about the forces that are shaping our identities, our relationships,
And to challenge our own assumptions.
all the time. Because what we might think is common sense could be based on, on biases or outdated beliefs.
Absolutely. We have to be open to learning, to evolving, to seeing things from
Yeah.
different perspectives. And I think most importantly, we need to approach these conversations with respect.
And empathy.
Which brings us to another key takeaway.
Hmm.
The need for open and honest dialogue.
We can't solve these problems if we're not even willing to talk about them.
And I mean, really listening, especially when we disagree.
Right. And I think that's where this essay, even with its, its controversial tone, it offers something really valuable. It pushes us to confront some uncomfortable truths.
To look in the mirror a little bit.
Exactly. And to engage in some critical self-reflection.
And, it's not about agreeing with every single point.
Of course not.
It's about using it as a starting point.
A springboard for deeper conversations.
Yeah, and those conversations need to happen everywhere. In our families, our communities, schools, workplaces, the media.
Everywhere.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from arranged marriages to bad boys to the pressures of modern masculinity. It's clear we're living in a time of immense social change, but where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? This essay doesn't offer any simple solutions.
Oh.
And honestly, I don't think there are any. But what it does offer is some really valuable food for thought.
I like to think of it as giving you, our listener, the tools you need to grapple with these complex issues.
The knowledge, the critical thinking skills.
Yeah, so you can form your own conclusions.
And that's what true empowerment is all about.
I love that. Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to touch on one more point the essay makes.
Okay.
It's the idea that societal shifts, while they're often presented as progress, they can also have unintended consequences.
Oh, that's such an important point to remember.
It is, and it goes back to that pendulum swing idea, right?
Yeah, sometimes we overcorrect in one direction.
And end up creating new problems in the process.
It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet and ending up flooding the entire bathroom.
Exactly, the
Yeah.
perfect analogy. And, the essay seems to suggest that this might be happening with some of these movements that are, pushing for radical change.
Right, their intentions might be good.
But are the methods? And what about the outcomes? Those need to be looked at carefully. It's not about resisting progress. It's about recognizing that social systems, they're complex.
Very complex.
We can't just yank on one thread and expect everything to fall into place.
Well, it's about a domino effect.
It can.
Yeah.
So we need to be asking ourselves, what are the trade-offs? What are the potential costs and benefits of these changes? And who might be affected, both positively and negatively?
Those are the questions we need to be grappling with.
They are.
Yeah.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with this question. If traditional roles and values are really changing, what new frameworks, what new support systems can we create to make sure that we have both individual fulfillment and societal stability?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and I don't think there's one right answer.
No, but I think it starts with recognizing that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution
We need to be open to different approaches.
to experimenting, to learning from our mistakes.
And most importantly, we need to center the voices of those who are most affected by these changes.
Absolutely. This isn't about finding the right answer, but about constantly working towards a more just and equitable society for everyone.
It's a journey we're all on together.
Mm-hmm.
So, to our listeners out there, keep exploring this topic. Don't shy away from the tough conversations. Challenge your own assumptions. And remember, it's not about finding the right answer. It's about having a thoughtful, respectful dialogue that moves us all forward.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to be honest, I don't think there's like one single solution that fits every situation. What works for one community might not be the answer for another, and what one person sees as progress, someone else might feel like it's, a step in the wrong direction.
It's true. It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but all the pieces keep changing shape. It can feel a little overwhelming. Where do we even start?
Yeah, I get that. But I think, the most important thing is to remember that this is a process. We're all learning and growing, and we're going to stumble along the way. The key is to be open to listening, to learning from our mistakes, and to being flexible enough to, change our approach when we need to.
I see what you mean. And that reminds me of something we talked about before, how crucial it is to get different perspectives on all this. If we only listen to people who are just like us, who see things exactly the same way we do, well, we're not going to get very far, are we?
Nope, not at all. We need to hear from those voices that challenge our assumptions, the ones that make us see things from a whole new angle. And when we're talking about something as complex as masculinity, those diverse viewpoints are essential.
So it's not just about having the conversation, but about who's at the table,
Yeah.
right? And being willing to admit that maybe, just maybe, our own perspective could be a little limited.
Absolutely. We got to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong. And more than that, we have to be willing to change our minds when we learn something new or hear a different point of view.
It's all about growth, isn't it?
It really is. Recognizing that learning is a lifelong process.
I like that. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. To our listeners out there, I encourage you to keep digging into this topic. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, the ones that make you a little uncomfortable. Challenge your own assumptions. And remember, it's not about finding the one right answer. It's about having thoughtful, respectful conversations, the kind that help us move forward together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about creating a dialogue, not a debate.
Exactly. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.